Qui-Gon Jinn was the former Padawan of Jedi Master Dooku, and was renowned as one of the finest Jedi swordsmen and most powerful Force wielders, with a deep connection to the living Force. However, he was also something of a family black sheep within the Jedi Order. His strong reverence for the Force above and beyond everything else often motivated him to go against the dictates of the Jedi Council, and occasionally against the Jedi Code itself. This maverick streak prevented him from being named to the Jedi Council, despite his renown within the Order and his close relationships with many of the body's members. In 32 BBY, Jinn was involved in the Naboo crisis, and was struck down by Sith apprentice Darth Maul after a heated duel during the final Battle of Theed. Asajj Ventress was originally a Ratataki from Ratatak, the child of warlords, but was recently retconned as a Dathomiri Night Sister sold to Ratataki slavers. Yeah, I don't like it either. Anywho, as an unclaimed orphan in the Ratataki ganglands, she was taken in by the shipwrecked Jedi Kai Narek, who trained her as his Jedi apprentice. Ventress and Narek became heroes on war-ridden Ratatak, and were targeted by the reigning warlords, who successfully killed Narek. Ventress went berserk, and she sold her services to the Confederacy of Independent Systems, becoming one of Dooku's enforcers in exchange for the military resources to conquer Ratatak and take her revenge on the warlords. Despising the Jedi for apparently abandoning Kai Narek on Ratatak, Ventress became a noted Jedi hunter, and thanks to training from Dooku, her skills developed to the point where she was even able to match Jedi Council Masters, a feat few of her contemporaries could match. However, her skills also alarmed Dooku's master, Darth Sidious, who was worried that she was being trained as a Sith apprentice in defiance of the Rule of Two, and Sidious ordered her execution. Ventress managed to escape, and sought asylum amongst the Night Sisters, though her subsequent attempts at vengeance only subjected her newfound family to CIS reprisals. Towards the end of the war, Ventress reappeared in a CIS medical facility on Bospity, where she received cybernetic augmentations. However, when the facility was attacked by the Republic, Dooku ordered his troops to gun down Ventress. Her body was retrieved by Republic medical crews, where she awoke from a Sith meditation after faking her death and hijacked the medical ship, disappearing for parts unknown. Her ultimate fate remains unknown. Considered one of the greatest Jedi sword masters, Qui-Gon Jinn was a master of the Ataru form, a fast-paced fighting style with a heavy focus on speed and agility. Jinn was a prodigy with the lightsaber at a very young age, his 400-year-old instructor proclaiming him his greatest student. Thanks to his decades of combat experience against a wide variety of opponents, Qui-Gon has had plenty of time to refine his technique. Jinn generally focused and relied more on brute strength as opposed to the Ataru norm of speed and agility, no doubt to compensate for his relatively advanced age. That being said, he was still very nimble and quick, and remained a capable acrobat. He was exceptionally skilled at blast deflection, compensating for one of the primary weaknesses of the Ataru style. His frequent use of kicks and punches implied a high level of skill in unarmed combat, and was in keeping with Ataru's focus on using the entire body as a weapon, rather than relying solely on the blade. Qui-Gon Jinn's effectiveness against multiple opponents was something of a mixed bag. He had little difficulty engaging gaggles of opponents, though he was practically useless against properly organized opposition. This particular weakness was demonstrated during a sparring match against his apprentice Xanatos and a former pupil, Femur. He had no difficulty engaging them individually, and simply outmaneuvered or shunted them aside and took them on one at a time. However, as soon as they attacked him as a team, Qui-Gon was quickly disarmed. Qui-Gon also had some skill at chaining force-based attacks into his lightsaber sequences, though this ability was somewhat limited, and he often had to lower his guard while concentrating. Qui-Gon Jinn's offense was fast-paced and powerfully relentless. Considering the purely offensive nature of Ataru, his defense and stamina were passable. Rather than rely on tactical or strategic ingenuity, Jinn was a purely intuitive fighter who preferred to adjust his technique based on the needs of the moment. While this trait made him very adaptable on the battlefield, it also meant that he often got in over his head due to a lack of tactical foresight. Also, his master, Dooku, was able to devise maneuvers and specialized attacks that were 100% effective against Jinn, implying that he was extremely predictable. An infamous Jedi hunter, Ventress was a master of Jarkai dual blade fencing and received advanced training in Makashi from Dooku. During her early training under Kai Narek, Ventress was trained in one of the more orthodox Jedi forms, though it's not specified which, likely Ataru or Naiman due to their commonality, and the fact that both possessed dual blade training regiments, which would have acted as a gateway to her study of Jarkai. Ventress was extremely fast and agile, and was a talented acrobat, which supports the idea that her original style was Ataru. On the other hand, she was talented at chaining force-based attacks into her lightsaber sequences, which lends itself to Naiman. However, as we've seen with others such as the Starkiller clone, one does not preclude the other, and she may have studied both in equal measure. Initially, Ventress was incapable of bringing a significant amount of strength to bear when fighting, a flaw with dual blade fencing, as you're limited to fighting one-handed. Accordingly, she was easily blocked and vulnerable to committed power attacks. However, she eventually developed sufficient upper body strength to compensate for this, and became a forceful duelist, and has held up simultaneous blade locks with 2 or more opponents at a time. While her form was criticized as sloppy, Ventress still demonstrated good precision and balance. Ventress was highly effective against multiple opponents, and has held her own against up to 4 duelists at a time with little effort. Ventress also had little difficulty with blast deflection. Despite specializing in dual blade fencing, Ventress was still quite competent, if slightly less effective, with a single blade. In addition, she was also an expert at unarmed combat and a capable saber-staff fighter. Ventress also had a great deal of experience as a military commander, and was accordingly a skilled strategist and tactician, though she was often blinded by her rage. Her offense was relentlessly fast-paced and utterly brutal. Her defense was strong, though she relied just as heavily on evasion and distraction as skilled blade work, leading opponents by the nose and guiding the battle to a place of her own choice. Qui-Gon Jinn has a definite and obvious strength advantage, having developed it to compensate for his flagging stamina and agility. Ventress is obviously the faster of the two, as she remains in the prime of her life. While her bad temper has gotten the better of her more than once, her tactical skill still gives her an advantage over Jinn's purely intuitive operating style, as she can plan her fights out ahead of time. However, the most damning piece of evidence is Qui-Gon Jinn's lackluster defense. Ventress could hold him off, but his weak defense would be next to useless against her animalistic frenzy. Asajj Ventress gets the edge. A human male in his late 50s, early 60s, Qui-Gon Jinn was in excellent physical shape for a man of his years, though he was still well past his prime. While still extremely strong and agile, his primary edge was due more to his experience rather than overwhelming physical ability. So, capable, but nothing to write home about, because, he's old. Asajj Ventress is let's just say, human female in her mid-20s. She's fast, agile, strong, flexible, extremely well trained, and makes the shaved head look really sexy. And that prize-winning smile. Very much to write home about. Do I honestly have to explain this one? Asajj Ventress gets the edge. Qui-Gon Jinn had a strong connection to the living force, which, among other things, was the source from which all practical force abilities are derived. In keeping with his practice of Ataru, Jinn was adept at using the force to enhance his own physical capabilities and was a superhuman acrobat and remained quite nimble despite his age. His skills with telekinesis were reasonably advanced, and he had little difficulty with lifting heavy objects, and he has even applied it in combat. However, as previously mentioned, Qui-Gon has a great deal of difficulty applying telekinesis in combat, and frequently lowers his guard while concentrating. His telepathic abilities are also reasonably advanced, and he has been criticized for an over-reliance on Jedi mind tricks to accomplish his ends. However, he can only influence the minds of weak-willed subjects. Strong-willed species such as Toydarians and Hutts are beyond his ability to influence. He has been able to telepathically contact certain individuals, but only willing subjects. Jinn may be able to probe or contact unwilling individuals, but he has never been depicted doing so, so I assume he can't. On the whole, Qui-Gon Jinn has a strong connection to the living force, but he also has a lot of reverence for it, which means he'll only ever rely on his force abilities when absolutely necessary, preferring to be an instrument of it rather than the other way around. As a result, a lot of his practical force abilities are somewhat undeveloped, despite his superior understanding of the Force. Despite her lack of experience, Asajj Ventress was a gifted Force wielder with a lot of raw talent. Like Jinn, she too was adept at enhancing her own physical capabilities through the Force, and relied on superhuman agility to move about silently. Her skills with telekinesis were advanced, and she could influence tens of objects at a time and lift tons. As previously mentioned, Ventress was skilled at applying it in combat, and has even attacked fellow Force wielders with it, breaking through their Force shields and harming them directly. One of her greatest demonstrations of her mastery with this was when she took out an entire squad of clone troopers on Yavin 4, breaking their bodies against trees or drowning them in grottos, ghosting the entire squad spread out over miles in a matter of minutes. Asajj Ventress's telepathic skills were also well developed, and she often used Jedi mind tricks to accomplish her ends. Ventress was even able to use her powers to dominate a Rancor, breaking it and making it her steed. However, as with all users of this technique, Ventress's influence could be resisted by strong-willed subjects. She was also provided with some training in Sith techniques by Dooku, notably the Qui-Tek meditation, which allowed her to conceal her Force signature and move about unnoticed by Jedi. As with Dooku, she could be found out if she was actively being looked for, though she often took pains to conceal more mundane signs of her presence as well, to ensure that no one ever saw her coming. Qui-Gon Jinn is obviously the more experienced of the two. However, his offensive abilities are nowhere near as well developed as Ventress's, and she completely outmatches him in scope and scale. While I'm willing to concede that Jinn could definitely hold her off, he has no effective way of fighting back on this front. Asajj Ventress gets the edge. Qui-Gon Jinn's lightsaber followed the custom of his day and featured an elaborate internal design. The scalloped hand grip was composed of numerous small power cells, which allowed Jinn more control over the lightsaber's electrical charge levels. Microscopic circuitry governed the nature of the blade. The activator was a simple red button on the upper third of the hilt, while the charging port was along the bottom third near the pommel. Jinn utilized a single green-hued Adagan crystal as the focusing lens. Asajj Ventress wielded a set of curve-hilted paired lightsabers, given to her by Dooku after he retrieved them from the body of his former student, Komari Vosa. Paired lightsabers are two separate lightsabers capable of locking together and becoming a saber staff. The paired function provides options in combat, and because of the S-curve of the hilt when joined, the blades are slightly offset, making the weapon extremely difficult to defend against due to the variable and unpredictable angles of attack. The curved hilts provide massive ergonomic benefits, fitting better into the palm and providing greater leverage and control, as well as better facilitating one-handed usage. Both hilts use red-hued synthetic crystals as the focusing lenses, providing greater cutting power at the expense of maneuverability and control. While Qui-Gon Jinn's lightsaber is a fine piece of craftsmanship, its design is completely and utterly standard, and it provides no advantages beyond the norm. The ergonomic benefits of Ventress's lightsabers, and the options provided by the paired function, makes them more effective weapons in battle. Asajj Ventress's lightsabers get the edge. And now, the verdict. As you no doubt learned from my Kit Fisto vs. Ulic Qel-Droma video, receiving most of the edges in each category doesn't guarantee victory. Ultimately, I have to make my judgment on the basis of how the entire package adds up. So here we go. Martial arts training and physical capability are very closely linked, because it's your body that has to perform the moves. Qui-Gon Jinn's physical capabilities very much dictate how he fights. He may specialize in an acrobatic and highly energetic martial art, but he's very much a power duelist due to his physical condition. He's in his late 50s, early 60s, so he's slowing down, his joints are suffering, so all he has on his side is size and bulk, so he has to retool his fighting style accordingly. Ventress, still in the prime of her life, has no such limitations. Yet. However, physical capabilities don't seem to matter too much when you can empower your body through the Force and overcome whatever shortcomings you possess. In this area, sadly, Qui-Gon is also very limited. The problem is his reverence for the Force, his complete worship of it. He allows it to guide his actions almost completely, doing everything in his power to remain in concert with it, and he only ever draws on its power when absolutely necessary. As a result, his practical Force abilities are somewhat undeveloped despite his superior understanding of the Force. Ventress, on the other hand, has practically no understanding, but wields a lot of power and practical ability. No reverence, instead just abuse, and the results show. Logistically speaking, any competent Force wielder could become Starkiller if they were willing to go far enough, but so few are. And yet another way Qui-Gon Jinn's mentality bites him in the ass? As he relies on the Force to guide his actions, Qui-Gon prefers to make decisions on the basis of intuition rather than planning or in-depth analyses. And this shows in how he fights. Very adaptable with a lot of in-the-moment awareness, but no foresight. I'm not saying Ventress is the master of foresight either, but she still at least makes the attempt to rely on strategy and plan out her fights. If Ventress fights smart, she'll lead Qui-Gon around by the nose and make him chase her rather than going toe-to-toe, then crush him when he tires. Going toe-to-toe, I'd put them on par, because while Qui-Gon suffers from a weak defense, he can still match her offense. However, Ventress, while a rabid dog, is still intelligent enough to know when to back off and play it smart, and as soon as she starts doing that, Qui-Gon's got nothing. I declare Asajj Ventress the winner. This is just my opinion, so feel free to chime in. Short comments below, essays emailed to this address. Don't make me regret putting my email address out there. This is Jensare, the Nerd Rage Ranter, signing off.